Hello and welcome back to SEMA's podcast. Y'all ready for this? Where we talk about all things emergency preparedness to help you and your family get ready for any type of natural or man-made emergency right here in Chatham County. This week, you guys, I'm really excited to bring to you the individuals from the Chatham County Public Information Office. They are incredible. You guys will learn about it soon enough. But with me today, I have the director, Catherine Gillespie, and the assistant director, Abigail Murphy. Thanks, guys, for being here.
Hello.
Thank you. We're happy to be here.
Yes.
Well, yes. You guys, you may recognize their voices or their faces. They host their very own podcast, The Chat, that talks about all things Chatham County. So if you're ever in the mood, hop on over to their station and listen to information about The Chat. I've been on it a couple times. It's a lot of fun. They're pretty dynamic and they take you all over the place. Am I right? Do you guys take them all over the place?
We do. Anything that is a resource for Chatham County for our residents, we talk about.
From mosquitoes to parks, we got you covered.
That's right.
Please make that your tagline. That's incredible. From mosquitoes to parks, we got you covered. Abby, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. All right. So listeners, today we are going to talk to you about what happens during an emergency situation. So you guys are accustomed to receiving SEMA alerts on your phone, or maybe you follow us on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram. Have you ever wondered where those messages come from and who originates them? Well, take a good look, because this is the team. Yay! Right. Or at least part of the team. We'll talk about how expansive our program has gotten over the last couple of years since Catherine took over at the beginning of Hurricane Matthew. Gosh bless. But it's been a heck of a ride. Catherine, let's go ahead and start. What in the world, can you tell us what this idea of a joint information center is, how it's structured, and how we kind of have grown over the last couple of years?
Sure. So a joint information system, or a joint information center, I should say, is a part of a GIS, was a joint information system. But the JIC, as we call it, it's kind of where all the communicators come together and they figure out what the messaging needs to be for a certain event, and then they start putting that out to the public. They're also the media liaison. So when a media person wants an interview with the incident commander, which very often for us is Dennis Jones, your boss, Chelsea, depending on the incident, but a lot of times for us, it is him. But people want to talk to him. Our residents want to hear it on the news from him directly, because he is the authority on emergency management in this area. So we arrange those interviews. Sometimes behind the scenes, we will be giving him talking points, making sure that he has all the facts that he needs to make sure that he gets it right when he does an interview. Not that we really have to do that with him. He knows his stuff, so I don't really have to do that a whole lot, but sometimes it's just more comfortable if you have something in front of you that you can refer back to. So those are some of the things that we do, but all the social media that goes out during, we'll say a hurricane. During a hurricane, all that social media that's going out, all the information that's going on the SEMA and Chatham County website, or the ready.chathamcountyga.gov.
Yes.
I got it.
Yay!
Something that would always trips me up. Our emergency website that only gets activated at a certain level of disaster. All that information is coming through the JIC, the Joint Information Center. And we're also, like I said, we're doing those interviews and things like that. We're also monitoring social media and the media to make sure that they aren't putting something out that maybe isn't quite right. Most of the time it is close to right, but then they'll have one little tiny thing wrong. But for a resident, that could be huge. So we're monitoring that so that we can work with them. And it's not that our media is doing anything bad, but we'll be able to call them and say, hey, this wasn't quite right. And they're like, oh God, let me fix that right now. So, they know that they can get their information from us, and we're the official source, and they get it out for us, for our residents. So that's a lot of what we do within the Joint Information Center. When you're thinking about a hurricane and one that we might have to evacuate for, we're getting a whole lot more media than just our like 6 or 7 media outlets that we have here. We're getting NBC National, NBC New York, CBS National, ABC National, Fox News. They're all coming in, the Weather Channel. They're all coming into us, and we are that official conduit of information. So there needs to be a centralized place for that to come from. And that's what the Joint Information Center does. And in a traditional Joint Information Center, or a JIC, I'm going to start referring to it as a JIC, but when in a traditional sense, you would get all these professional communicators from all your municipalities, your Department of Health, the school system, all those things, they would come together and start putting out that information. We've never found that that actually works here because a lot of our municipalities don't have public information officers. And the city has their own ECC instead of EOC that they man. So their PIOs are there. We're in constant contact with them, but they're going to be there instead of with us. School board, sometimes they have to be where their command people are, or they've been asked to evacuate so that they can be safe and come back after the storm. Same thing with DPH. So it hasn't really worked for us. And we found during Hurricane Matthew in October of 2016, that was the first storm. Chelsea, you and I, that was like the beginning of all this craziness that has been for us for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
I had been with the county for about 10 months. I had been the PIO for the county for about 6 months. And I got married and went on my honeymoon. And I have a counterpart. This was before you started. And I had a counterpart over at the DA's office. And I said, hey, could you fill in for me for this week while I'm on my honeymoon? I swear to you, you won't have to do anything but maybe write a press release or answer a media call. It will be very, very calm. The storm is not coming here. We're all okay. And she said, yeah, sure, I can do that for you. She ended up working a 7-day activation. I think she slept for about 6 hours during that 7 days. And she became my best friend after that, and my JIC partner after that. But I actually didn't make it back. I kept trying to come back, but I didn't make it back until after the storm actually hit. In the meantime, you had started with SEMA, like, what, 2 weeks before Matthew hit, and you were getting married. So you left like right when I got back. I think we missed each other by like a day. But Matthew taught us that we couldn't do it by ourselves, because you and Kristen were trying to do the entire Joint Information Center by yourselves. And yes, you had partners out in the other agencies that were helping you as much as they could, but they had other responsibilities and they just couldn't physically come to the JIC and start helping you. So in light of that, you and I decided that we were going to reorganize the JIC. And that was about the same time we were starting to bring on staff for the PIO office, because at that time I was by myself. That's when Abby joined us, and our former colleague, Nick Beard, joined us. And so it was the 4 of us. It was 4 of us against the world, right? And we did a couple of tornadoes that way. And a small activation, that's fine. Having the core group of 4 of us is good. But we decided, if we've had a Matthew, what happens when we have the next storm? So we started looking internally at all of our different departments. There's 23 departments that report to the county manager. And then we have a whole bunch of county agencies as well, like the DA's office, voter registration, board of elections, tax commissioner. And we started looking at the employees there and saying, who has special skills? Who has special skills that could help us out? So now we have people from the DA's office. We have people from the clerk of commission's office. We have HR folks. We have voter registration, CNT, which is our counter narcotics team. There's even more than that. And that's what I can think of off the top of my head. But each of those people have a certain skill. Like we have a lady over in HR, and she's an admin over there, but she's a professional photographer. So during a storm, we grab her and say, hey, come take pictures for us. we have the clerk's office. So normally they're the ones that are taking the minutes for the commission and handling all those kinds of things, working with the commissioners. What do they do all the time? They take notes, they make them verbatim, which is amazing. They do a lot of proofreading, and they already have established relationships with our elected officials. So drawing them into our group was great. They help us with our press releases. They help getting the word to the commissioners. CNT, we have a young lady over there that comes over and works with you a lot, Chelsea, on social media. And she's a very level-headed person. And, you know, when people are trolling us, she's just like, oh, okay, well, let me just hit them with facts, you know. Luann is great about that. So that's kind of how we started switching over. Now, we don't bring all those people in until we get to a certain level of activation. So we're not going to take all those resources out of their departments if we don't need to, but they're there when we do need them. I know that was the really long way around this, but it's hard to explain other than that. So,
well, it's hard to give it's hard to give a historical perspective without taking the time to be able to do so. So I thought you did a fantastic job with that. Thank you.
Okay.
What you failed to mention though from the beginning is that you're in charge of it all. And that's why we brought you here. You are our lead PIO. So there is like an organizational structure that Catherine, you know, Abby and I really just sat down a couple of months ago to solidify that this is the organizational structure that we're going to stick with because we've seen it work even up at national classes that Catherine's gone to. Catherine, can you explain that structure a little bit? And then go ahead and jump right into what in the world does a lead PIO do, and we'll kind of work down from there.
Okay, so our structure is pretty simple. We have a lead PIO, and then is kind of in charge of this external function group 15 or ESF 15 as we call it, or the JEC. So the lead PIO is in charge of that, and then often you'll have a deputy PIO or a JIC manager. And then that person is really kind of organizing everything that's happening in the JIC. They have their pulse on everything, their fingers in every pie, so that they know what this person's working on. They know when this product needs to go out. They know when we need to get information from this group or that group. So that position is like really important. And then we have 5 different divisions within the JIC. And we've restructured this as well, and we've kind of made it our own. But when I went to an advanced public information officer course up in Emmitsburg at the EMI, Emergency Management Institute, I found that having kind of like divisions that were strike force groups really worked well in our exercise up there. So I brought that back and said, Chelsea, what do you think about this? And you were like, well, that sounds kind of cool. So what we did was we made these 5 different divisions, and we're going to go a little bit more in depth in what these 5 different divisions do. But I'm going to get Abby to help me with that in a minute. But we have social media and website. We have content creation and dissemination, videography and photography, information gathering, and a VOST. And Chelsea, in a little while, if you want to touch on VOST, I'll let you do that because you know that one better than I do. And then we have field PIOs. And like I said, we'll kind of go through what each one of those has responsibilities of doing, but I'll start with the lead PIO. So again, everything stops with me. So the buck stops here. I'm the one that's in charge. And if something's going to go wrong, it's going to be my fault. And luckily I have amazing people that work with me, and there's very rarely that something goes wrong. I'm not going to say that we get all the information right. I'm not going to say that we even get it out perfectly. But crisis situation is just that. And sometimes things can't happen in the order that you think that they're going to happen, or as fast as you think that they're going to happen. Most of the time it isn't misinformation that goes out. It's information that when it went out, it was correct. 30 minutes later, it's not correct. And that's because it's a crisis evolving situation. But it's my job to work with the command staff, the incident commander, the county manager, the board chair for the commission, some of the elected officials, to make sure that we're getting all the messaging that we need and knowing what direction that we're going in. Means that I don't get to sit in the JIC and work with all the wonderful, amazing people that are there all the time. It means that I go off to meetings like every 5 minutes. But that's how the JIC gets its cues on what we need to do, is because I'm sitting in those meetings where they're making the decisions. I may not necessarily be a part of the decision-making process, but I'm there while it's happening. And I can sit there and text, hey, we're going to put this out in 20 minutes, get it ready. As soon as you get it ready, send it to me, send it to the incident commander, let us approve it, let us get it out. And then when there's problems that arise, if we get something on social media that's just crazy, sometimes I'm the one making the decision on how we're going to respond to that, or the website or the media. I'm the one that's going to make that decision ultimately on how it's going to be handled. But like any good manager, I'm going to come back to my division heads, like the two of you, and go, what's your input? What do you think we need to do? You're closer to what product you're working on. What do you think we should do? And, I trust you guys implicitly. Ultimately, the decision has to come down to me because I'm the one that's in charge. But I feel it's really important to have that input. So that's kind of what a lead PIO does. It can be a fun job. It can be an overwhelming job. And there are definitely times and days that it is not fun. But you're always striving to make sure that the right people get the right information at the right time. That is the mantra of crisis communications for emergency management. So that's kind of where we are with that. That help you with the lead PIO?
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Okay.
All right,
Sometimes
let's
I
move
get
over
for my
to-
own stuff.
Yeah, I love that you always have your own spin on it. And I think it's awesome. And I think that that's what makes this JIC so successful, is who sits at the top of it. So I think it's fantastic. Speaking of people who sit at the top of it, let's talk about the next level. And that is our JIC manager, a deputy PIO, and our Chatham County Public Information Officer, Assistant Director. Abby, tell us a little bit about your JIC manager role and what that looks like. I know this will be your first hurricane season, or your first activation coming up in that full role, but you've honestly filled it for the last several years. So what do you think? What's going on with it?
Well, as Catherine mentioned, when she's sitting in meetings and she's texting someone that this needs to go out, I'm usually the one that's receiving that text. And so I will delegate that to the necessary person or do it myself. It just depends on what's going on. I just kind of feel like I have my finger on the pulse of everything that's happening. Catherine's telling me what's going on. Other people in the JIC are telling me what's going on. And I'm making sure that everyone has the resources that they need. If there's anything I can do to help, I feel like I kind of float around and just make sure everyone's okay and everything's getting done. So it's there's never a dull moment, really. It really isn't.
And I just want to say, she kind of glossed over that for a second, but she's actually the one that is in charge of anywhere from 4 to about 6 people at any given time, and making sure that that work product is happening and that it's going out when it should. So that is a huge role. Unfortunately, it's one that she's kind of leaving behind, except in small activations, because she has been promoted to lead PIO on the opposite shift as me. So big blow to me, because she is my rock of Gibraltar. And I don't quite know how I'm going to do an activation without her, but we will muddle through, because that also gives me a lot of security on the other end, knowing that my B shift is going to be handled exactly the way that I want it to be handled. And unfortunately, through some strange events, we lost our other lead PIO who went to work for somebody else. So happy for her, but left a hole for us. But Abby will be plugging that hole, but it leaves a bigger hole for me.
It'll be interesting, but I'm up to the task.
Yes.
Be awesome. It's going to be awesome because, you know, Catherine mentioned it during Hurricane Matthew with the person that she promised would only ever have to write a press release. That individual worked a 7-day shift and slept for about 6 hours. So Catherine says that she has a B shift and that she's going to take time, but we all know it's not going to happen. Catherine's just going to continue to work for an unknown amount of time. So it's going to be great. We're all going to continue to work together and work through all the different pieces. All right, so we've talked about lead PIO, we talked about JIC manager, deputy PIO. I think we obviously social media and website design. That one is kind of self-explanatory. But Abby, you want to cover a little bit since you manage those?
Don't gloss over that because you can talk about that. That one is yours. You're in charge of that. And I think that social media is a really important topic to mention, Chelsea. I mean, tell us a little bit about, I'm moving into your role for a minute. Tell us a little bit about what you do for social media during an activation.
Yeah, well, so social media is a lot of fun. It does give you a lot of different perspective dealing with the general public on a consistent basis. So you guys are watching this in some form of social media right now, or you're listening to it, podcasts and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, all of those are included. So we are award winning in our social media capabilities during an emergency situation because we ramp up. We're running 24/7 operations. We're making sure that your questions are answered. So I'm kind of the person behind the keyboard there, I guess, but instead of behind the wheel, answering your questions, going live on social media, talking about, you know, the challenges that we're seeing, things that you should do and how you can prepare. It's a really fun division to be a part of because it's like the direct line of communication. So just like we have a phone bank for people that answer phones, we have a bank of people that are solely responsible for answering questions on social media. So that's what the entire unit or division is really doing in social media. It's fun.
It's
a lot of fun.
It's one of our most important roles that we have in getting communication out, because while we love our media partners and we know that people watch the media, if they want to interact with us one-on-one during a crisis, that's where they're going to do it, is social media. They can ask a question and they're going to get an answer. And they're going to get an answer in a fairly timely manner. You're not going to have to wait hours to get an answer. You're going to get an answer probably within 30 minutes max if we're busy. I know you guys strive to do it pretty instantly, actually. But you know, there are times that changes. But okay.
Well, and it helps.
I turn host duties back over.
Well, I was just going to say that knowing the questions that people are asking on social media helps to inform us, like, or should we make some sort of infographic, because this seems to be a confusing matter that's happening right now. And so that way we can post it and then that can be shared widely. So it's just a really important line of communication that we utilize.
Yeah, absolutely. And Abby, fantastic segue here into content creation. Do you want to explain that one a little bit? I mean, you kind of started with, you know, understanding what needs to be created in that partnership.
Well, since we've been going at this for years, we actually have some kind of standard content that we know to expect if a hurricane comes. You know, there's probably going to be some traffic signals out. There's going to be some things that we expect will occur with any hurricane. And so we have those infographics ready to go because it can be confusing to remember what to do when the traffic light goes out. So we actually create plenty of content in advance, knowing what could potentially happen. Now, of course, every storm's a little different, so we have to create things on the fly as well, depending on what's going on. And so that's why it's so important to know what people are saying on social media, what questions people are asking at phone banks, anything like that. That helps to inform us and know, oh, hey, we need to create something new. We can't pull something from, or maybe it's something we had created, but we need to tailor it more specifically to this storm. So we try to do everything as efficiently as possible to get that information out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Important to point out too, in that same division, we actually have a dedicated person that's answering the phone when the media calls, so that we're making sure that we're not missing stuff from them, because again, that is one of our main conduits to our residents and our visitors is the mainstream media. So we want to make sure that they aren't having a hard time getting in touch with us. We're trying to make sure that their interview requests or their questions don't get lost in the mix. So we have a person that's dedicated to that. The phone calls come in on my cell phone. When we activate on that scale, I hand my cell phone over to somebody and I don't see it again until we shut down the JIC, which is a blessing and a curse. But, I mean, I think that's important to note, that we have somebody who does that within that division that's completely devoted to that conduit of information.
Yeah, it was huge when we added that role. That helped out so much to know that there's one dedicated person to handle your phone.
Right.
Really helps.
Yeah, it's always a game of hot potato, or at least it was before that position of like, who's got Catherine's phone now?
I actually had a reporter one time ask me, they were like, hey, I've been trying to call you for 2 days and I can't get you on your phone. And I'm like, dude, when activation happens, I'm not going to see my phone again until we shut down the JIC. It's just not going to happen. But ask to speak to me and they will get you to me. So, I mean, that's just, it's the way it is. But Chelsea, our next division is also another way of getting information to people. We're going to use those conduits of either the media or social media or our website, but videography and photography are so important. When I was growing up, it was always a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a video has to be worth 10,000 words. And we have become a very visual society and watching videos. And you have worked with our videographer in the past during these crisis situations to make sure that we are getting content out so that people know exactly what we're doing. We've taken tours through the EOC so that people know what each position is. They had a chance to ask questions to the people that were watching through Facebook Live. We've done videos with our ASL interpreters, American Sign Language interpreters, so that we aren't leaving a section of our community without communication. We now do a lot of stuff, not necessarily in video, but we do a lot of stuff with our other communities, like our Hispanic community, because we don't want anybody to not get life-saving messages. So we have a videographer and we have a photographer during an activation, and they can help with those kind of videos. Sometimes they're going to be out with the drone and looking at damage assessment, so that we have a lot of times, think about Hurricane Matthew. Hurricane Matthew, we had quite a bit of debris down. I say that very tongue in cheek. The feds actually went back and readjusted the model of how much they expect an area like ours to get damaged based on what we had from Matthew, because they were like, we should have like a quarter of the damage. So when that's happening, though, it's dangerous for our media to be moving around and trying to get those videos themselves. We've got trees down, we've got power lines down, we had flooding. All those things became very dangerous. So we actually, I don't think we did it for Matthew, but we did it for Irma. And we actually sent somebody out to get that footage for them and said, here it is, here's raw footage, use it however you want. But we don't want you to get electrocuted by waters or by power lines that are down. We don't want you driving across bridges that haven't been okayed by the Department of Transportation as safe. So we've been doing those kinds of things, which I think have been very important. Our news media seems to have really embraced that idea. And now that there's streamlined ways to get video out to them, that helps. Photography, taking pictures of people while they're working, taking pictures of damage, taking pictures of recovery efforts. Those are all really important because they tell a story. And that's what we do as communicators. We tell stories. And so I think that division is very important. It's one that we will continue to grow over time. It's just now in its infancy. But you'll see more and more of visual content from us as we progress, maybe not in a crisis situation. I can hope, I'm going to find some wood and knock on it, that we don't have any kind of crisis situation this year other than a health crisis. We don't want crisis. We don't ask for these things to happen. So, but another one that we have is information gathering. So we're always looking for information that's out there somewhere, whether it be on the news or whether it be in social media or on the internet, and making sure that, we're fact checking. And sometimes that's how we get rumors. So I can think of a couple, I believe we were preparing for Dorian, and there was some supply chain issues leading up to that. And people were saying, oh, gas stations all across the place are closing because they can't get gas. Well, when we started doing some research on that, turned out that that wasn't happening here. It was happening in some of the communities around us, but it wasn't happening here. So we were able to immediately address that and say, no, you can still get gas. You can still leave town. Please go evacuate. But that's the kind of information that we're looking for when we have these information gatherers. We're not trying to catch anybody in anything. We're not trying to tell anybody that you're just out and out wrong. We're just trying to find those pieces of information that aren't quite right and dispel them for everybody else so that we don't make our own crisis. And really the VOST is a part of that. And Chelsea, do you want to kind of explain very high level what a VOST is?
Yeah, so a VOST is a virtual operations support team, and it's very similar to the way that Catherine just described information gathering. It's just like a more formal term that other people may be familiar with, or other communication teams across the country might be familiar with. VOST was really helpful when you think back to Hurricane Harvey in 2017, where they had people that were really just going onto Twitter and going onto Facebook and saying, hey, I'm trapped on top of my roof and there's nothing that I can do, and 911 isn't working, or I can't get through to 911, and they're posting, I need help. So there was a VOST team, I think out of Colorado, that started deploying and virtually deploying and helping really kind of keep track of all of these people that were saying that they were lost, or they were confused about what to do, or they didn't have an idea of what they could do or what resources were available, and then sending that data directly to the emergency operations center so that they would be able to respond effectively. And they really found that that was a fantastic resource that I don't think a lot of people had really thought about or used before. So we started to see a lot more technology evolve out of this era of 2017 and 2018 with all the storms that started to come through. So this is our version of a VOS so that we can handle it internally, but fully recognizing that we may have to rely on other people outside of the area or even residents to be able to tell us what's really happening in the community. When we're in our mode of JIC, when we are just into the keyboard and into all these meetings, it's hard to kind of break away and just watch the news for a while, or just look through social media. So this is a team that's solely focused on that piece so that we try not to miss anything that could be happening in our community.
Right. And then our last division is our field PIO. And depending on the crisis, we may actually need to have a PIO on site of where the crisis is happening, so that they can help to be that conduit for the media for what's happening on site. We're handling a lot of stuff back at the JIC, but sometimes you just need someone right there. And it could be that your incident commander can't talk on, camera or something like that at that moment in time because they're super busy. So the PIO that's in the field would be able to give that interview and make sure that that information is still coming out. And then when you think about a hurricane situation, when we start to evacuate, like I mentioned before, we're getting not only all of our local media, we're getting state media, and we're getting, or I shouldn't say state media, regional media, and we're getting national media come into town. So when you think about a evacuation assembly area, you've got thousands of people that you're moving through there, and then you now have a ton of news and camera crews there. And sometimes you just need somebody there to assist them and say, okay, well, here's the ground rules. You can go and interview people. We'll provide you people that are official source information, but we need to go through this process. And it helps the media to get what they need, because that's our primary goal, is to make sure that the media gets what they need. And it allows it to be done in a very succinct fashion. So that's what a field PIO does. That's what makes up the JIC. In a large activation, we're going to have anywhere from about 10 to 17 people working 24 hours. So, we divide those teams up. But that's kind of like the minimal amount of people that we need. We probably really need to actually grow a little bit more depth into that, because if you have an activation, we've been fortunate. I think our longest activation that we've had was about 17 days. And the crisis part of that was like maybe 12, 13 days. But then we had some stuff afterwards that we had to stay activated for. But that begins to wear you out. When you go 17 days without a whole lot of sleep, no days off, by the time that you're done, all you want to do is sleep for 3 days straight. But a way that a longer activation like that should work is that you have relief people that come in and take over for you, give you a day off, make sure you get 8 hours of sleep, knock somebody like me in the head and say, get out of the JIC, you've got to go to bed. That's what we need. So we'll continue to add people to our roster so that we get that kind of depth. Hopefully we will never have to work a 17-day activation again. That's always our goal. We don't want to have to work these things because we don't want to be in crisis. But the reality is we're going to. And I can think of a lot of events that could go on a whole lot longer than 17 days. So that's kind of where we are with our staffing and what a JIC staff looks like. I'm so proud of my people. I really am. I'm so glad that I have the team that I have, because they really are a team. I don't feel like I have to be a boss with them because they come together as a team and we all work together for a common goal, which is make sure that we get our information to our residents.
That was beautiful, Catherine. I love it.
I know, I have a little tear in my eye now.
Oh, the love here. You can see it. Hopefully you guys can hear it and really understand. All right, so as we get ready to wrap up, we talked a whole lot of stuff there, just, very structural, very technical. Let's talk about fun stuff. Give me an example of a time that we activated the JIC where something ridiculous happened or something that maybe you'll never forget. I'm interested to see what stories you guys are going to pull, because we all worked all the same events together.
Well, I have to say the one that sticks out the most in my memory is definitely going to be #running from a bobcat.
Absolutely.
So,
I don't know how that could ever be topped.
I don't know. And when this airs, we're going to have to send Nick a link so that he can see this. Nick Beard, our former videographer and producer, he went out for damage assessment after a tornado hit Oatland Island, and Abby and I were sitting in the JIC, and I think Chelsea, you were there. You may have gone home by that time because I think you had worked earlier in the day. And so we're sitting there, and we hear from our Chatham County pilot over at Mosquito Control that he can't get into the area where we're doing damage assessment because there's a drone up. And we'd sent Nick out to do damage assessment and put the drone up. So I pick up the phone, I call him. Nick never answered on the first ring, ever, a day in his life. First ring, he answers and he's, hello. I'm like, hey, I need you to get that drone down because we need to get Scott into the area. And he's like, I don't have a drone. We're running. And I'm like, you okay? He's like, we're running from the bobcat. We're going to die. And then he hangs up on me. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I remember looking over at Don Sullins in the command center there. And I said, well, Don, I have good news and I have bad news. Good news is it's not our drone. Bad news is all of our people may be dying right now by being mauled by a bobcat. And I remember Don just cool as a cucumber, reaching over, picking up his radio and saying, SEMA 2 to SEMA 4, you guys alive? And SEMA 4 on the other side of that, Michael came back and he was like, yeah, I think we're okay. Oh, we can't find a bobcat, but I think we're okay. And it turns out the bobcat was never out of its enclosure. It hid under a rock, but the people that were moving through damage assessment didn't know that, and they had gotten word that it was out. So, they were all panicked trying to get out of the area. So after that, we came up with hashtag I'm running from a Bobcat, and we would just really give Nick hell over it. I think there have been signs that have been put on his office door. I think we talked about a t-shirt at one point in time.
Yeah.
So, while it was a really serious, scary situation, looking back on it, we could really laugh and enjoy it. Abby, I know you have memories from that night as well.
Yeah, I don't know if you were in the room when this part happened, but we saw Michael on the news because it was the big SEMA jacket. We saw him from the back, and they were like, "Oh, there's Michael." And then we were like, "What if he turns around and it's actually a Bobcat wearing that SEMA jacket?"
See, that's what happens when you've been in these situations for too long. Your mind just goes different places because you're so tired. But yeah, that was probably one of our most memorable. We've had lots of fun times in the JIC because you do have to make fun of yourself a lot. I can remember the person that we mentioned before, the one that helped me out during Matthew. She did a couple more storms with us. And I remember at one point in time, she was so tired, she sat down on top of a cooler. And next thing I know, her feet were going over her head as she slid off the back of this, cooler that had drinks in it. And so, I told her she did that and she didn't even have a drink. She wasn't, she was stone cold sober. So, we have fun things that happen, and we come up with, we find our own way of making fun. Chelsea, one of the ones that we did, I think it was during Irma, where we had like the top 50 sayings that came out of the EOC. Yes. The pine cone hits you at 39 miles an hour, it's still going to hurt. So we had this whole list of things. You do things to give yourself some comic relief, because if you're serious for 14 days straight, 24/7, you're not going to make it out the other side alive. So, and then, Abby, I'm going to throw it to you for a second. Do you have any other funny stories before I wrap up my stories?
Well, I just know that after lots of lack of sleep, we all get a bit delirious and silly. So there's nothing in particular, but I just know like we get to a point of silliness and then something will just set us off and we are cackling because we're just so sleep deprived. And it's a good stress reliever to have that moment, because then you can get back and focus in on the job. But I will say I've got to admire Nick's dedication to still answer his phone, even though he thought he was being chased by a bobcat. So absolutely, man dedicated to his profession.
Yes. And I would say just, going serious for a moment, Chelsea, but kind of wrapping this up for you. Working in a JIC situation where you're in high stress all the time for days on end without relief, you get to know your team really well. And that may be people that you've been working with for years, or it may be like for me, when I worked the C-130 plane crash, I was working with somebody I'd never met before. He was a military PIO. I never met him before, but really when you're in that kind of situation, you just kind of learn to gel together and you make lifelong friends. Roger and I will always be friends. We see each other every time he's in town or I'm up where he's stationed. And you just come away being closer to people and really just making those friendships that are going to go past just a work environment. And I think that that's important. I talk about relationships a lot. Anybody who knows me knows that I talk about great relationship building. And to me, this is one of those places where you have to have that, and you do make those friends that last for a lifetime. Okay, now I'm going to cry, so I'm going to shut up.
Wow. I've said this a couple of times, and I'm going to go back and watch this and say, like, man, Catherine, you just said that so beautifully and so succinctly. Like, you could tell that you podcast. So I think it's awesome. And I think this has been a treat to be able to interview and be interviewed at the same time, because it's all something that we're really passionate about. And we all feel like it's a really important job that we have. Every position within the EOC or Emergency Operations Center is important, but there is definitely something special about the Joint Information Center team, because when your job is to communicate directly to the public about the hazards that our entire community is facing together, that takes a special type of person, and it takes a special team to be able to do that appropriately and in that timely manner. So I appreciate this amazing team and all the all the members of our program. It's been awesome. And I'm excited, I can't say that. I'm not excited for future ones, but I know that if we have to activate again, I know that it's going to be okay because we're going to be there together. So thank you guys for joining me today and talking a little bit about what it is that we do. I think you guys are awesome.
Well, thank you so much for having us, Chelsea. When you asked us to do this, I was like, okay, well, I know that we'll have fun because the three of us always have fun together, but I'm not sure that people will really be interested in the JIC. But in listening to what we talked about, I really feel like it was informative for the public. So thank you again for having us. Thank you for doing this podcast to help our residents out. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And hopefully, listeners, if you're ever inclined to be a troll on social media, you'll think twice after seeing all of our faces and realize that we're humans and we're just sending messages out that need to go out because it's the information that is there and it's what needs to go out. So there's my little tidbit as your social media person.
Ultimately, we are here to help, and we're trying to keep everybody safe is really what our role is. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. On that note, listeners, I hope you enjoyed. This is a totally different podcast than what we've done in the past, but I hope that it was informative and it was something fun and lighthearted. #running from a Bobcat. Next week, we are doing something different yet again, and we are actually meeting again with Lee Harold with Occupational Safety, Risk Management, and Disability Services. Remember, that's the very long name. But we're going to be doing fire safety, and it's a different type of fire safety because we're going to show you and explain for those that are listening how to use a fire extinguisher. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hope you guys are ready for it. Until then, thanks guys. Bye.
Bye.